Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome back to the show. My guest today is Andy Harrison from London in England. Andy was on the show before, a great episode. Everybody loved his dry, humorous, level-headed, soft-spoken style of discussing. So what did I talk to him about this time? I mean, he's from England. You talk about rail. You don't want to talk about the weather. So what else is there other than asking him for his view on the High-Speed 2 project? What I didn't anticipate is that his answer and the subsequent discussion filled up almost the entire time that we talked about. We did talk about a little bit about high speed in Australia as well towards the end of the episode, but all up, that's another episode about high-speed rail. I hope that you enjoy it. I've got plenty of high-speed rail enthusiasts on the show, and so I'm pretty sure you will like it as well. And the other exciting topics I wanted to discuss with Andy will have to wait for future episodes. Please enjoy, tell a friend about it, and subscribe to the show if you haven't already done so. Thank you. Hi, this is Doc Frank. Let me jump in here right now to tell you about a new training which is called High Capacity Signaling Blueprint. This is a very unique all-in-one training that gives you everything you need to know about high capacity signaling. The foundations where you can compare what conventional signaling is to what high capacity signaling is with all the necessary definitions. Then we look at CBTC, communications-based train control, as the prime technology for high capacity signaling and how this is done. In the third part of the training, we look at varieties of the European Train Control System, ETCS, another global train control technology, and how this can be used to achieve high capacity signaling. And then at the end of the training comes an actual blueprint how to apply CBTC or ETCS to get a real high capacity outcome for your railway. It's basically 3 training courses in one, and as usual for my trainings, there is a study group available for joint learning with other people taking the same training. And after the training, you will get into an alumni community, which is exclusive for my training students, where you can ask questions and get them answered by myself on an ongoing basis for a guaranteed minimum of 12 months. You can sign up on my usual training platform, which is docfranktraining.podia.com/HCS blueprint. I said it again, docfranktraining.podia.com/HCS blueprint, with HCS being the acronym for High Capacity Signaling. If it's important for you to learn about the latest trend in railway signaling, which is high capacity signaling, then this is the training for you. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Great to see you again and good to be here.
Thanks very much. I'm selling you out there when I do my podcast announcement as the voice of reason. Yeah, because as listeners will probably hear within seconds, you are a very soft-spoken, a very considerate person. And I just love talking to you about all kinds of things. And for today, I can't really help myself than starting with, you are based in the UK, so you are British. What's your thought on High-Speed 2 and all the hype over there? What I have heard from a distance, and I have got this verified from various people I've spoken to, including on this podcast here, that there has been the government decision last year to reduce the initial scope of High-Speed 2. Instead of going from London to Birmingham and then onwards to Manchester and Leeds, I hope I got this right, it's now basically cut back all the way to London to Birmingham only. And it doesn't even seem to be clear from exactly where in London to where in Birmingham, especially in the London area? It's not quite clear. Does it only go to Oak Common, or does it go all the way into Houston, and so on? And the other thing that I have heard from several sources is an enormous blowout of the cost for high-speed 2, which, according to informed sources and data analysis, what have you, of almost 100 high-speed projects, makes high-speed 2 currently the most expensive high-speed rail project in the world by a long stretch with regards to cost per kilometer built. So with that premise, I thought, well, next time I speak to somebody from the UK who knows about railway, I just got to ask the question. Yeah, what's your view on this?
I always like these conversations, Frank. You always start with easy questions. There's no kind of gradual build in or anything like that. I'm smiling at the idea of being the voice of reason. I'm not sure that says very much about anybody else, but we'll try. HS2 is yeah, absolutely has been a big issue in the UK. Certainly UK rail industry and politics for quite a long time now. So the government's announcement last year restricted the development of the scheme to Birmingham Curzon Street, so the city centre of Birmingham. It cancelled essentially the schemes north of that, which is a political decision based, I suspect, on cost and other political factors. The difficulty on the south side was that the scheme had not been able to come up with a cost-effective solution to a terminus at Euston Station in London. So Euston's a mainline station, as you know, for trains travelling to the northwest. That was going to be the central point for HS2 trains to arrive in the city. That required major works in the Euston area and some significant works to the station itself. So over many years, the scheme and the DFT and others had tried to come up with an affordable scheme to increase capacity at Euston Station, and so far they've not been able to do that. So the government's taken the decision to terminate HS2 for the moment at Old Oak Common. And Old Oak Common is, Londoners would kill me, but it's probably 5 or 6 miles out of the city centre, so 5 or 6 miles down to Euston. It's a station on the Elizabeth line. Well, there's a close station on the Elizabeth line on your Crossrail service. So the idea is that people will jump off the HS2 train at Old Oak Common, transfer across to an Elizabeth line service, and use that for the final journey into the city. Meanwhile, work goes on to try and come up with an affordable, more private financed solution for the development at Euston. It's an expensive piece of work. I mean, there's tunnelling to do from Old Oak Common into the city, which is always expensive, and then there's significant construction and disruption to be had at Euston itself. So I'm not seeing a solution pop out anytime soon on that. And I think at the moment, I read the other week that the plan was to drop the tunnel boring machines into the box at the start of the tunnel to Euston and essentially leave them there until a solution for the station had been evolved. So difficult times, I think.
The Elizabeth line doesn't stop at Euston, does it?
No.
Right. Okay. So it's basically a question whether Euston would be a significantly better drop-off point, given that you would probably have to change to other forms of public transport, be it the tube or so anyway, in order to get to other places in London away from Euston. So unless it would take passengers major inconvenience to get from Old Oak Common into the city centre, various places in the city centre which are served by Crossrail or the Elizabeth line now, it seems to be almost just as good. I mean, 6 miles is not really that much. Yeah, so on the Elizabeth line, you should probably do that in, I don't know, 10 minutes or something like that.
And I think essentially that's the political argument that's being made for the moment. Until we have a an affordable solution for the Euston area and a route into Euston, then there will be an increase in disruption for passengers. It's not an ideal solution, but that disruption is manageable. Old Dock Common is shaping up to be the biggest station in the UK. You have HS2 terminating. You have Crossrail running into Acton Main Line, and you also have Great Western trains running through the area from Paddington out to the west. So it's going to be a busy station. There's huge construction works in the area.
The other concern that I could see basically off the bat would be what it does to the capacity of the Elizabeth line, like how full, how crowded the trains are, if whole loads of high-speed passengers from Birmingham are basically dropped on that line at Old Dock Common every few minutes, every half hour or something like that. Yeah. So that's also what I would see as inconvenience, that people may have a connection into the city, but they are unable to board the trains until, past the morning rush hour or something like that.
It's a point well made. I think when they opened the Crossrail line and termed it the Elizabeth line, London, we started gently calling it the Lizzie line, with all due respect to the dead Queen. And the Lizzie line over time has morphed into the busy line. And that's pretty much how I would describe it. It's busy already. I think journey patterns on the Elizabeth line are significantly more than people were expecting. I think HS2 passengers will add to that burden. We'll have to see how it goes. I think the unfortunate thing about the announcements last year was that there is already a good train service between London and Birmingham, London and the West Midlands. West Coast route modernisation was done in the mid to late 2000s. Train services to Birmingham have been fairly solid since then. So a high speed route from London into Birmingham, in theory, relieves some capacity, frees up some capacity on the existing West Coast, which would be a good thing. But the real benefit of HS2, personal opinion, was for people north of Birmingham. And the sadness, I think, the disappointment, certainly for me as a northerner, is that those people have missed out on an opportunity. So the people in Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, who were looking forward to faster trips to London, that's not going to happen for some while yet. And that then takes you to a slightly different place, which is, well, you need to step back and think about what the purpose of high-speed rail really is. I think as an economic growth catalyst, I think that's probably the reason why we do these things. We encourage growth around high-speed terminus. We make connections between city centres easier. I think HS2 perhaps has missed an opportunity at the moment. I hope not missed an opportunity permanently. There's a lot of discussions going on about protecting routes north of Birmingham for future development, and I hope that's not dead in the water.
That's the last thing that I heard. I mean, I get a lot of information from LinkedIn. There is a quite outspoken. Well, he writes obviously on LinkedIn, but in terms of posting, he's quite outspoken. I think he works for the Manchester Council or something like that, and he was basically driving the high speed strategy for the Manchester area, and. So not only that he keeps bringing up interesting high-speed projects from overseas, from other countries, saying, well, see all the benefits of high speed. This is what it can do for a region. This is what it can do for population, economy, and what have you. But at the same time, in the UK, we're basically cutting back to Birmingham. But the last thing I heard from there is also the threat that the corridors that were meant to be used for high speed 2 would be abandoned north of Birmingham. And I think that would really be a catastrophe, because, I mean, it doesn't have, I don't really think that, say, to better connect Manchester with Birmingham, I don't think you need a top speed of 350 kilometers per hour. I mean, many have already considered this as a vanity metric for high-speed 2 between Birmingham and London. Or respectively, having a journey time, a very tight journey time commitment that was apparently unnecessary, that kind of mandates this extremely high top speed, which drives the cost up dramatically. So, but even when you just wanted to have a slower connection between, say, Manchester and Birmingham and between Birmingham and Leeds, slower meaning, I don't know, somewhere between 200 and 250 kilometers per hour, which would probably be a big improvement for those areas, you still need a corridor. You still need a corridor for dedicated higher speed services. And when you abandon the corridors, then the door's probably shut forever.
I think most reasonable people would say that if you've made an investment to allocate a corridor for a rail line between two major cities, and it makes sense to protect that investment. It makes sense to protect the corridor because you don't know what the future will hold. And so having made the investment once, protect the corridor. But I have to say, I mean, politicians' insanity is sometimes divorced. And so people will make, political decisions which are, which reasonable people would look at and say that's madness. Why would one political party make a decision, if you like, to renege on a corridor, to cause problems for a different political party on the assumption the other lot became the government? It makes no sense. The right thing to do, the sane thing to do, is to protect the corridor, open, and maintain the possibility of building the link at some point in the future when the business case can be better supported. I think. I certainly hope that's what they do. I hope sanity prevails because the alternative would be crazy. You mentioned costs. Sorry, Frank.
Yeah. No. Keep going. Keep going. That's about you talking more than anything. But I in a previous interview I had exactly that point. A bipartisan support for generational initiatives such as high speed, because we have exactly the same problem in Australia at the moment. And the idea was, an example where that works very well is in Spain. The idea was really to basically ring fence high speed as an apolitical or a bipartisan support country initiative of national importance or something like that. And in the UK, I thought I've seen something previously. I was on a conference in London in 2015, which is a few days ago. And somebody was talking about Crossrail 2, the Crossrail 2 project, which is apparently a north-south connection through London, as Crossrail 1 was an east-west connection. That's now the Elizabeth line. And I asked the question after the presentation, I asked the question, how does it come that they can have such long-term plans for something like Crossrail 2? They were talking about the early 2030s. In the year 2015, even though there's a fair chance that in between government will change a few times between the political parties. And the answer was very inspiring, I found. It was simply agreeing on something that just makes sense. So it seemed to me, or at least that was my take from it, that Crossrail 2 seemed to be an agreeable enough project that both political camps would agree, doesn't matter who gets in power, this thing is going to get built at some point in time. And the only difference, what I keep saying, if political parties want to differentiate one from the other, is to say, well, I put more money into it, I put more effort into it, I build it faster than the other party. But it shouldn't be one party saying, I build it, and the other party say, as soon as I get in office, I will stop it and basically pull the plug. That should not happen with any of the major transport initiatives, including high speed. And that brings us back to the corridor protection that you just rightly mentioned. If high speed, the establishment of a high speed network in the UK is really a priority, not just between London and Birmingham, but on a wider scheme, including the likes of Manchester and Leeds and maybe York and maybe also the two small cities in Scotland up there, then corridor protection that's supported by both political parties should be almost a no-brainer. But the fact that we're having the debate, or I'm hearing the debate in the UK at the moment, indicates maybe it's not so much a no-brainer. I don't know.
It's a strange one, really. I think the importance of support across the political spectrum for schemes which are of major economic benefit to the entire country, I think really can't be understated. You can't be in a situation where, you know, these schemes take years to build, not just rail, but, you know, power stations, all sorts of things. So you can't be in a situation where, you know, a project starts under a government of one colour and then falls away under a government of a different colour. You know, if something is of national importance, it's of national importance. And I think we need to accept that, which is a funny situation with HS2, because HS2 was initiated under a Labour government and then carried forward under a Conservative government. So I think by and large it's had bipartisan support. I think the political decision that was taken last year to curtail was driven certainly by cost, and we can talk about cost in a minute. But it was also driven, I think, by, you know, the idea that perhaps the funds that would be used to build HS2 north of Birmingham could be better used for more local transport schemes. So, you know, the train service quality from the northwest, you know, Manchester down to London, has been fairly deplorable over the last couple of years. The train service between east and west across the Pennines in the north has not been great. So the idea of using funds which had been marked for HS2 and then redistributing them to support other schemes, I think, was reasonably high on the political agenda as well. It's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 12 months or so. I think we're expecting here a general election. Prime Minister says second half of the year. If you believe the polls, there'll be a switch in the colour of the government. So we'll go from a Conservative government to a Labour government. Labour have been careful not to support HS2, but not to denigrate it either. So their position on HS2 is you know, it's, at least at a public level, is reasonably unknown. So we'll see what happens next. I think it's
they're holding the cards close to their chest. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you. I will make something, and it's definitely better than the other guys do. But I'm not telling you
I'm sure
now.
They're telling somebody. They're just not telling me. It's funny. You can't. You know, when you get to these big schemes, you can't really divorce politics. Politics are always difficult subjects to talk about on these sorts of conversations. But you know, we mentioned cost. And the cost of a scheme like HS2 is driven by multiple factors. It's certainly driven by, you know, maximum speed, and that's just not development cost, but it's life cycle cost. And what do you base a maximum speed decision on? Well, you base it on what it is you're actually trying to achieve through a high speed rail link. And I think, you know, for a line between London and Birmingham, it's entirely conceivable that you could have achieved the same real objectives at a much lower line speed and much lower cost. But I think I would guess that the line speed was more of a political decision actually than a scheme development decision. And the same is true of some of the other kind of high cost elements of the scheme. You know, we know how to build railways reasonably cheaply, but we also know how to build them reasonably expensively. And when we start tunneling, costs start going up. You know, if you then align that with top speeds which are eye-wateringly high, then costs really start going up. And if you're building it at a time when inflation is high, then you start squeezing. And I think HS2 costs have suffered because of all of those things. You know, the government mandated that HS2 tunnel through areas of national beauty, which is a lovely thing for the walkers, but not such a good thing for the people who are looking after the money. And you know, the top speed was agreed to be what it was, which pushes the price up even further.
Well, but that would be my question. I mean, cutting back the scope to cutting back everything north of Birmingham and cutting it out was definitely a major step and absolutely very much unpopular for anybody north of Birmingham, I would think. So how much different would it have been to basically go back and say, you know what, the costs are exploding at the moment. So we looked at the planning for high speed 2 again, and we decided to reduce the top speed by 70 kilometers per hour because that's going to cut the cost in half. And that enables us additional initiatives north of Birmingham or something like that. I would have thought a decision like that would have been more palatable to the wider population in the UK than just making a fetish out of this 350 kilometer per hour top speed, which is to my knowledge the highest anywhere in Europe, and if not anywhere in the world. I'm not really aware of commercial high speed lines at the moment that travel at faster than 350, and 350 is what the Chinese do. So is the objective here to set a world record and cling to it, or what's the objective here? Because as you said, if the stated objective is a capacity improvement between Birmingham and London, that the journey time is only secondary, right? And we discussed the journey time with other guests on the show here about high speed. With journey time, the question is, well, the trick is to ask the right question. I mean, if I ask you as a potential passenger, would you prefer traveling to Birmingham in 45 minutes or in 60 minutes? That's a nonsensical question. Of course, you would say 45. Because you're not bothered about the additional cost that would mean to build the railway line. You just say, well, the railway line will be there at the end of the day. Then I want to use it, and of course I want shorter journey times. But that's the wrong question. The question would be, are you still willing to take that journey when it takes 60 minutes? Or maybe 75 minutes or something like that. So basically have almost a sensitivity analysis saying, well, if I reduce if I increase the journey time by reducing the top speed, how many passengers am I likely to use by doing that? And at the same time, I'm saving a lot of construction costs, and maybe the business case overall may become better.
So there's a lot of questions wrapped up in what you've just said, and it's a really interesting point, this, because if you sat now and said, well, what would be the implications of reducing the top speed of HS2 between Old Oak Common and Birmingham? So instead of running at whatever the top speed is, we're going to reduce it by X. Then the analysis, you would probably look at the analysis and say, okay, well, from a scheme design, development, and construction point of view, what's the impact? And I'm guessing that somebody would look at it and say, well, look, we've already got multi-billion-pound contracts awarded for construction to a wide variety of people. We're already building the thing. The sunk costs and the committed costs are so great that to make a change to the scope of this thing at this stage would be unreasonably expensive. So I think there's an element of, if you're going to start changing the scope, you have to pick the right time to change it. And I'm guessing HS2 would probably turn around and say this is not the right time to change it, given the level of contracts which are already in place. But and I think there was a political calculation made last year, because the people in Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds and others. I mean, for sure, north-south links are important. London is the economic centre of the UK, and there's a lot of activity in London which permeates all over the place. But the transport links between major cities north of Birmingham, so Liverpool, Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, are not great, and have been progressively getting worse. So I think if I was sitting in Manchester, I'd be sitting there thinking, well, hang on, I need to get to Leeds for a meeting. That's, the train service is unreliable. That's going to take me this many minutes. I don't really care about getting to London 10 minutes or 15 minutes faster. What I really want is a reliable train service from the east side, from the western side of the country to the eastern side of the country. So, okay, go ahead and cancel the northern part of HS2, but make sure you reinvest the money on improving the more relevant, if you like, transport initiatives between the cities and the north. And I think that's the expectation. I think that's what people's expectation is at the moment.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that's really going to happen. Yeah, what I rather see at the moment is that the cost saved by cutting back the Manchester and Leeds bits flows into high speed 2 between Birmingham and London because the costs keep blowing out.
Well,
yeah, and it's easy from Australia to basically pick on projects in the UK, but we've seen exactly the same stuff here. We had an audit last year of the Inland Rail project that I'm sure you've heard of. It's a major freight rail that is supposed to connect Melbourne and Brisbane, but funny parallel to High Speed 2, it's not exactly clear yet from where exactly in Melbourne to where exactly in Brisbane or near Brisbane. So very similar topic to your Old Oak Common and Euston thing for High Speed 2. And the audit was really devastating. Not only has the project cost grown to more than 3 times the original budget. So they started off with a budget of 10 billion Australian dollars and now it's 31. But it got worse than that. The auditor basically said 31 was the latest estimate. However, I have no trust whatsoever that this will really be the final cost. And nobody should think it's coming down. It's only going one way. So, and again, I can see a parallel in the UK with High Speed 2 where the cost estimates have gone up not just once but repeatedly, sometimes over relatively short periods of time or within relatively short intervals. So who has the certainty that the current cost estimate for London Birmingham high speed will really be it?
It's a good.
I don't think anybody has. And so there will be the need for more money flowing into this. And we have seen exactly the same problem previously with Crossrail, which also cost a lot more than what was originally planned. The problem is not so much the spending of additional money. The problem is that this additional money is going to miss somewhere else. So you need to take it away from potential other projects, such as your east-west connection north of Birmingham that you talked about. You simply cannot afford this anymore because the mega project that you're already committed to is eating up more and more and more funding.
Yeah, I think that the only person who would really be in a position to answer that is the chief exec of HS2 and the Treasury Minister, frankly. I think it's logical, isn't it, that the further a project progresses, there's less uncertainty moving forward because you've spent more money to get to where you are. So, if I look at the contracts which are still to be awarded are pretty much around systems. The train contract is clear. The construction contracts are clear. The Birmingham Curzon Street contractors, I think, has now been awarded. So that's in design and build. Old Oak Common, as I said, is a construction site. So the majority of big contracts have been awarded for this, and therefore you'd like to think that the uncertainty going forward in terms of cost is reduced. But I take your point. I think what's telling is that you've got to look at both sides of the equation. Business cases are approved on the basis of a set of benefits versus an anticipated cost. The benefits case for HS2 goes down following the decisions last year, and therefore to maintain a good positive benefits case, you'd expect that the cost would have to change as well. If the cost stays the same or goes up and the benefits go down, then your reason for investing in something goes down as well, doesn't it? And the difficulty is you part way through a project, you simply can't stop. It's quite a difficult political conundrum, and one that I'm looking forward to you guys facing now that I read about High Speed Rail Authority in Australia.
Tell me about it. I mean, the cost estimates, or the cost guesses, I should rather say, for high speed here has only gone one way, and that's up. So the latest figure I heard over here was $200 billion. I suppose that's for the entire corridor, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane. But as long as you don't know exactly how many stops you will have on the way, which means additional stations, additional infrastructure around the station, stuff like that, I'm not really clear how to establish a cost like that. So if I was a betting man, I would say the actual price tag at the end of the day will be significantly higher than $200 billion. And that really brings it into a category which is, at least 6 to 7 times as much as inland rail, just for perspectives. And inland rail is currently the biggest infrastructure project that's funded by the federal government. It kind of makes me nervous, and it kind of makes me even more irritated if I see arguments on LinkedIn that seem to imply we need to keep up with the Joneses. Like if Spain and Italy have high speed, of course Australia needs to have one as well. I'm very sorry. This is not an economic argument, and this is not an argument that should at all be permissible for taxpayer spending in that area of magnitude.
It's interesting. I think you need sometimes to step back on whatever project you're doing, whether it's high speed or rail or in fact anywhere else, and say, what's the outcome that we're actually trying to achieve? What's the reason for doing this? And the reason for HS2 in the UK was clear originally. It was to support levelling up. It was to increase economic prosperity. There's a carbon agenda which it was playing into importantly as well. And those benefits change over time. They change according to politics. They change according to the way the world is. And I think if I was looking at potentially a £200 billion bill, I'd be taking a step back and saying, what is it I actually want to achieve by doing this? Is this the best way as a government of spending $200 billion worth of taxpayers' money? Or could I achieve a better benefit for the taxpayer by doing something else with the money? So I look at high-speed rail in Australia and say, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Is it a decarbonisation agenda? Are you trying to reduce the number of people flying between major cities? Are you trying to increase economic prosperity of certain centres? Are you trying to generate economic prosperity in centres which are not particularly prosperous at the moment? Are you playing to population growth? And trying to create new centres of settlement, as we were talking earlier. Those questions need to be answered before you decide what the solution is. And what worries me a little bit is that high-speed rail is a I hate to say it's a vanity project. I don't want to say that. That would offend a lot of my colleagues. I really don't want to say that. But high-speed rail, it's a solution sometimes that seems to be looking for a problem. And I think we need to turn it around, and we need to say, what's the problem we're trying to achieve? Is high-speed rail or some other thing the best way of actually achieving this? And that's what I would like. Yeah. That's the argument I would like to see. And I hope that the high-speed rail authority in Australia looks properly at the benefits of what it's trying to do as part of its business case development work.
And it should be an objective that has to do with the well-being and the prosperity of the Australian population. Yeah. So especially these days, there's a certain risk factor that the establishment of a high-speed rail connection is simply explained with environmental reasons. Like, we need to do that because of climate change, because railway is more environmentally friendly than air travel, which de facto is correct. It kind of gets a bit watered down if you recognize the carbon emission from construction of the high-speed rail. So it takes a while to offset this again. But I'm not saying that we should do with the environment whatever we want. I would very much hope that a few decisions that were being made should have been made differently. But I think the reasons that you mentioned, or the list of potential objectives for a high-speed rail network, they all should have higher priority, and the additional benefit, the fringe benefit of being environmentally friendly, which railway normally is compared to other transport modes, that should take more a back position. It shouldn't be the only reason to do something, because even then you could build a high-speed line through the Northern Territory in Australia by saying, well, it's more environmentally friendly than flying there. But hardly any people fly, and hardly any people would use the railway service. So the argument would be nonsensical. Yeah. By the way, it reminds me of an April Fool's Day prank that I played on LinkedIn. I'm not sure whether you've seen that. I took an image from the road loop around Australia, the so-called big loop. Yeah, many people travel by car with caravans, motorhomes, whatever around Australia, which is officially called the Big Loop. And I posted this in relation with a post on planning for the future high-speed rail network, and basically that it's now considered to basically rebuild the Big Loop with high-speed rail. Yeah, starting off with a connection from Brisbane to Cairns, rather than going Melbourne to Sydney or something like that. It was explicitly on the 1st of April, and in later comments I made no secret of that it really was meant to be an April Fool's Day prank. This post was the most viral that I have ever done on LinkedIn, and not just by a small margin, by a factor of 8 or something like that. It was mind-boggling how viral that thing went, and people took it so seriously. Yeah, like, what is this little thing down there? There's nobody living there. or why can't we have a cross country connection going from Sydney directly to Perth or to Darwin or something like that? So people really, they jumped on it. They took it actually quite seriously. Frighteningly seriously, and I was just wondering whether you can basically sell the greatest nonsense to the wider public by just using the right words. Yeah, so I basically use some official words like government authority and stuff like that. And so basically what mainstream media would do as well. So it read very official, but it was still absolute utter nonsense. Yeah. So nobody in their right mind would say, oh, well, okay, we built a high-speed rail along the Great Ocean Road or something like that. It's just,
I think it's, maybe it's, I'm smiling at that, but maybe it's the fact that at heart, we're engineers, and, we like to try and solve problems. But I think the art of systems engineering, which is what we've kind of become over the years as railway engineers, is to work out what the problem is first before deciding on what the solution is. And I think high-speed rail in Australia is a good example of that. You could find yourself spending an awful lot of money without real clarity about what it is that you're trying to achieve. And clarity, can come from lots of reasons. There's the economic prosperity and the settlement argument. There's the decarbonisation agenda, which is important. But there's things like, supply chain development, and whether this wants to become does Australia want to become the world expert in high-speed railways and export that technology and that know-how across the world? I don't know. There's a lot of things, a lot of factors at play, but you need to work out what the problem is you want to solve before deciding on the solution. And we'll see. Yeah. I'm intrigued. Yeah. The High Speed Rail Authority is doing business case development work this year, I gather.
Well, that's one of the things that's being criticized. That some decisions were made without the necessary transparency to really understand why that is. Yeah, so it was basically a formal media statement. The federal government creates this new high-speed rail authority to basically bundle all the activities around high-speed planning, including faster rail. We previously had a national faster rail agency. This has now merged, or this has now been integrated in the high-speed rail authority. And the first task will be to develop the business case for the Sydney to Newcastle connection. Why? Why this? Why not something else? And promptly you have discussions like, why do we have to start in Sydney? Why do we have to go north of Sydney? Surely the most important corridor should be between Sydney and Melbourne. So if anything starting in Sydney, it should go south rather than north. And from what I can see, or what I can guess, it's mainly because of lack of transparency. It's not like somebody saying, well, we looked at 4 different options, A, B, C, and D, and we ended up deciding for Sydney Newcastle because of this reason. Or here were our criteria, here's a multi-criteria analysis, whatever the rationale would be, any rationale. And you could still argue then whether or not you agree with the decision-making criteria, but at least you can see there's a decision, why it has been made, on what basis it has been made. I think that would help. It would certainly help me, because it makes the public feel less powerless, less like, well, somebody in Canberra has just dropped this thing on us, on everybody, and this is just what it is. Decision made.
Yeah.
Well, how? I mean, the people who have made the decision must have made the decision on the basis of certain criteria. Why not putting it out in the open? Because of criticism? I mean, not explaining the decision at all, if anything, gets to more criticism, I think.
Well, I think that's it's a good lesson in life, and it's a good lesson in political life as well, which is essentially what you're talking about. There may well be good reasons for Sydney to Newcastle. I could see reasons, for example, that might be less about the outcomes that you're trying to achieve for that particular route, but more about saying, well, actually, we've not built high-speed rail in Australia before. Let's use this as an opportunity to find out how land and consents works. You know, what it costs us to actually buy land for the corridor. Let's think about construction costs and how we can minimize. Is there something special about this, topography that will give us some lessons learned for the future?
Well,
so I can imagine those sorts of arguments.
Yeah, that's another thing that was part of the criticism, is that Sydney to Newcastle is presumably the most difficult and the most costly terrain of the entire Melbourne-Sydney-Brisbane corridor, maybe except in the city center of Sydney, where you need to tunnel for God knows how many kilometers. But from outside the city, that stretch of corridor is apparently the most onerous and the most expensive to build high-speed rail, which was part of the criticism as well. Why do you have to start with the most difficult thing? Why can't you start with something in the flat land, which should be much easier and much cheaper to build, and so on? So, but then again, I'm pretty sure there were reasons for that, but I think we are no longer in a situation where we just close our eyes and say, well, I'm sure government will have made the right decision. Even though I don't understand one bit of it, but I basically trust those people blindly that they will make the right decision. I don't think it's not just me. I just don't think that's contemporary anymore to basically act like this and basically treat the population like clueless idiots. I mean, for starters, we do have a strong railway industry in Australia, with lots of people, including myself at times, that understand at least a little bit about railway, that can basically look at these things and then say, yeah, well, maybe don't quite understand how this decision was made. It looks kind of,
I think decisions,
strange, questionable.
Decisions which are made with transparency are always better decisions. You know, I forget who said it, but the best disinfectant is sunshine. So when you open a decision up and you let people look inside the box and understand what the rationale for it was, then the decision has some credibility. And I agree with you. I think the world has moved on. We're a more transparent and open society. in some areas of the world anyway, than we ever used to be. And yeah, exactly. So we should be pressing our political masters and saying, look, you're spending millions and potentially billions of our cash. We would like to understand the rationale for you doing so. We're not judging. We would just like to know. And I think that applies to rail, but it applies to lots and lots of other things. Lots and lots of things.
Yeah, and as I said, criticism will always be there. You cannot rule it out. And I guess criticism about a certain transparent decision will not be as bad as criticism about having no transparency at all. I know you have to go on that very note. I just like to wrap up. There are various things that I would like to talk to you about as well. But I think we leave this to a future episode or 2 or 3. So thanks very much for your time today, Andy, and looking forward already to the next conversation we have.
It's always good to see you, Frank, and thanks for being such a good host. It's these conversations always take me to places I hadn't anticipated, and you leave me with stuff to think about, which is the best way of finishing. So thanks.
Cheers, Thank Frank. You. Bye-bye. The interoperability of digital signaling systems is not just an issue here in Australia, but also in other countries that have several railway systems interoperating with each other. Therefore, I have created the best and probably only training in the world on the topic of digital signaling interoperability. It includes my trademark SPA framework. If you want to know what that means, just have a listen to the training. I talk about digital signaling in Australia, which is transferable to other countries as well. I introduce the main technologies CBTC, ETCS, and also ATMS, which is a special bespoke Australian development. I talk about the hierarchy of interoperability controls, which is extremely helpful in investigating what can be done regarding interoperability. I talk about interoperability between different CBTC systems, interoperability between ETCS, which is not as easy as it may seem, and also interoperability between different signaling technologies. Podcast listeners are currently getting a special 10% discount if they sign up before the 30th of June 2024. And the link to sign up is docfranktraining.podia.com/interoperability. I say it again, it's docfranktraining.podia.com/interoperability. Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share, and until next time, keep it simple, and bye for now. Thank you for listening.